so many, yeah.
Honestly, I think you should.
Okay, 1 minute.
Yeah.
Did you say you have a pull-up bar in there?
I do, set up just back over there. So I got a pull-up bar, and then I got, then I do a lot of lunges, got some kettlebell.
That's for another live. Okay, we're gonna get going. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Right. We're excited for the opportunity to be connecting with all of you as we mark our first town hall meeting for the coalition to save the health and wellness industry. So today we've collected over 2,000 petition signatures in less than 2 weeks. And tonight we're honored to introduce our special guest, federal NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet's been speaking out in the House of Commons and working to get the government to work more for contract workers and small businesses, and we're looking forward to sharing our stories, voice our concerns for our industry in the light of the pandemic. So we will be inviting members of our coalition from across the country who will be asking some very important questions related to our coalition, and then also invite all of you to participate as well. You can use the chat box to put your concerns and your stories in there, and then we will turn to you following the question period. So feel free to use that. We will leave the mics and the cameras off until you're called upon to speak. And we're going to kick things off with Callie Rikus. So Callie has a question with regards to rent relief, which is the biggest question and the biggest concern and something that we're all speaking about right now. So Callie, I'll throw it to you.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight and taking the time to hear our stories and give us some space to just share what we're going through. I am the owner of a big wellness facility in Toronto called Bolo, and since we closed our doors on the 16th, we have basically decreased our revenue to almost zero, as I'm sure a lot of people on this call can relate to. Of course, like the others, our rent continues to be due, and we're not earning anything at all. This leaves us in a situation where many of us are in default of our leases. We continue to have discussions with our landlords on how to handle this. Most landlords have proposed rent deferral options or debt-based agreements, but this is extremely scary for us, as most of us can't afford to take on more debt, liability, or incur more loans. And it just simply won't be sustainable in the future. So simply put, we need rent relief options, and we need some kind of guidance in how to handle these situations with our landlords and how to navigate right now so that we can get through this time until we hear more. What is your take on this?
Well, first off, thank you so much for telling your story. Your story is exactly what we're hearing from so many people, but particularly in the fitness industry. I mean, you're keeping people healthy and fit, but you've been specifically told not to operate, but you still have to pay rent. Like, those two things don't add up. Like, on one side, we get, of course, the importance of physical distancing. You're being told you can't operate your business, but at the same time, your business still has to pay fixed costs. It just doesn't make any sense. So we've been calling for, first and foremost, one of the biggest things that would help out, and you've highlighted it, is if we could get a pause on rent, not a deferral on rent, but a pause. And the way we're offering, or the way we're suggesting to do that, is the federal government completely has jurisdiction over banks. Banks obviously are the ones that are responsible for mortgages. So if the federal government can enforce a freeze on mortgage, then we can negotiate with provinces to get a freeze on rent. Both those things can come together. And for some businesses that own their buildings, they can get a pause on their mortgage. But most importantly, for those who are renting, you can get a pause or a freeze, a stop to all payments when it comes to commercial rent. I think that's what we need to do. We're pushing for it. We've been pushing, and now we've heard that the government's talking about some sort of rent relief. We're going to closely monitor that, because we want to make sure that really actually helps businesses like yours, Kaylee.
Thank you. And in terms of just how to handle the situation as it stands now, do you have any sort of advice for us on how to handle these conversations at this point?
Well, it's really tough. You talked about the kind of landlords. Like, I shouldn't have to come to that, but I don't know of any immediate relief right now. There are things like the wage subsidy, so folks should definitely apply for that if that applies to you. There is a $5,000 interest-free loan Again, that raises a concern about going into deeper debt, but 10,000 of that, 25% of that is forgivable. So that might be an option to get people through the short term. So consider applying for that. I would reach out to your local MP in terms of getting details about how to get those federal programs. But a lot of them are available very clearly on the website. But I would consider the interest-free loan with the 10,000 or 25% that's forgivable, and maybe looking at the wage subsidy, if that might help some folks that have got staff that they have to worry about as well. But it's tough right now, and those personal negotiations with landlords seems to be the only real option. But that seems to be a really unfair and tough option for businesses like yours.
Thank you so much for your time.
Of course.
Thanks, Callie. We're going to move on to Cindy Cram, who's from Toronto, and she has a question with regards to tenant protection and speaking to our rent issue. Cindy, you just want to take your mic off mute.
Hey. Thank you so much for your time, and again, sounding off of Kaylee, giving us a chance to get our stories out there, because it's affecting so many of us broadly across the spectrum. So my name's Cindy. I am a studio owner out of Toronto, Studio YYZ, based in Midtown Toronto. And, our future's pretty much already been told for us. We've already been out of our space now for 21 days due to COVID-19 closures. And, a lot of other commercial tenants face defaulting on their April rent, and they're vulnerable to losing their space after 16 days with the right to evict, and having their doors locked, losing their possessions. How can the government better protect us, as tenants, what can be done for tenants like us who've already been locked out of our spaces? Is there something that the government can do retroactively?
Cindy, first off, just thanks for sharing your story. And really, this is a chance for stories to be shared. A lot of folks don't know about what small businesses are going through, particularly in the wellness and fitness space. People don't know kind of the challenges that you're up against. And so sharing these stories in and of itself, we're going to make sure people hear about this. We're going to raise these concerns by hearing your stories and giving you that space. A big part of this is to make sure people know, hey, there's a whole segment of people that are being left behind here, and there's really no help out there. So in terms of the tenant protection, that all falls under the federal government. It is very tough, though, for commercial tenants. There isn't a lot of specific protections for what you're describing. So that's why we really are pushing for immediate rent relief. We need to make sure people who have businesses that have rent to pay have some relief immediately. And really our goal is, in this crisis, we shouldn't be putting that additional burden on businesses that they have to pay their rent right now. We want to get a stop to all rent payments, stop to all evictions, and particularly for commercial rent and commercial lease situations. These are your businesses like yours are the backbone of any good economy. You need to have small businesses that are vibrant. And you also do the additional benefit of keeping people healthy and fit. So there's an extra benefit. We got to be supporting you and making sure that you're able to go back to this work once we get through this crisis. So I'm going to continue to push for rent relief, putting a pause, a freeze, a moratorium, a stop to rent right now. That's really our big focus. And our work has shown to push the government to now announce that they're going to do something around rent relief. So we'll closely monitor what that is to make sure it's actually going to help you out and help out businesses like yours, Cindy.
Thank you so much. Tying into that, though, for those of us who have already lost our spaces or have already been locked out of our spaces since the 1st of April, what kind of options do you think we'll have?
I don't think that's something that people have really contemplated. I don't think the government have businesses that have been locked out and people who don't have access to their equipment. And I think that it's in or your decisions, something completely out of everyone's control, a global pandemic, if that causes small businesses to lose access to their equipment, to be locked out of their space, to me, that just seems so incredibly unfair. And so we have to find a way that that's not the case, that's not what happens to people, even though it's happening right now. So it's something that I guess that has been completely missed. And now that you've raised it, it's something that I'm going to make sure we have some attention put to it, some thought put to how do we actually help out people that are in that position.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thanks, Cindy. What's the reality of commercial tenants receiving some type of protection similar to residential tenants?
Well, I think that we need to. There's just no question to it. We need to make that happen. Commercial lease and rent is one of the biggest costs, fixed costs, one of the biggest fixed costs for most businesses, and particularly ones we've been hearing from, where you've got a studio or a physical space to work out and to bring clients to. And absent any help, a lot of these businesses can't continue. There's no way they're going to be able to continue or to be able to restart. So we've got to work now to make sure that these businesses get help. So I'm very confident we can push this government to get immediate rent relief, rent supports. We're hearing some talk about those announcements that are coming out, but we're pushing for urgency. This is not something we can wait for. So I'm confident. First of all, it can be done. There's no question about it being possible. It's about whether the government's willing to do it. And that's why I'm pushing the Prime Minister and the current government to say, listen, one of the things that we hear from all small businesses, rent. We need a freeze on rent, lease, those types of fixed costs.
Speaking about what happens afterwards, we have Alessia here from Montreal who's going to ask a question with regards to post-pandemic support.
How are you guys? Can you see me?
Hey.
Yes, hi, how are you? So happy to be here. This is a great initiative, and thank you for organizing this meeting for us. Really appreciate it. My name is Alessia. I'm the owner of Report Fitness based out of Montreal. We have 3 locations in Montreal, and we were about to build our 4th.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, unfortunately, this is on hold, but still hopefully will happen. But once the outbreak started, it was just the timing when we were supposed to build our 4th location. I don't know about, I think we're all coming from different places. In Quebec, the 16th of March was the date of the mandated closure. So we've been closed as of that date. All the memberships were put on immediate hold for absolutely all of our members. So it was not like a choice of keeping some percentage still going. Basically, our revenue stopped as of March. I'm seeing somebody talking. Do you guys still see me on the screen?
Okay.
Do you guys still see me? Yeah, okay, perfect.
Yep, you're on the screen.
Yes. So the question that I wanted
you're on the screen. Yeah, you're looking good.
Perfect. The question that I wanted to raise is what will happen after the closure will be lifted? It will happen hopefully eventually, but we cannot expect our lives and everything to go back to normal right away, correct? So it will take us time to reestablish our revenues, to regain clients' trust and regain our members. We can imagine that the social distancing policies will be in place for some time after we reopen. So, and it would be interesting to know what kind of limitations to expect in terms of that. So let's say, for example, if we have to have 6 feet between the clients, this impacts significantly earnings of class-based studio like our gym, and I'm sure many yoga studios and other class-based gyms. So given that, like, we might be operating at 50% capacity for months after the reopening, and so what do you guys think about that? Because the rent will be, our landlords will still expect 100% of rent for the spaces that we're occupying, although we will be only allowed to operate at 50% capacity. So that's the long-term plan in supporting the gradual recovery and gradual reduction of social distancing.
Yeah, so really good point, because we're kind of in 2 general phases. The first is the immediate crisis and getting through that, and then there's going to be the recovery. So really important for us to start thinking about what is that recovery going to look like, and for the fitness and wellness space, what's that going to look like? Well, one of the things that we know has happened in the past has been when we're in a crisis, we see normally governments put a lot of effort into giving the largest and the wealthiest corporations lots of financial support, but we don't see that help for smaller businesses. And so what I'm really going to push for in the recovery is to acknowledge that small businesses are not in the same position as a large business that has all of these things in place to allow them to get back up and running quickly. Smaller businesses have all the challenges you talked about: advertising, getting the clients back, and the scale up is a lot slower for a small business than imagine a larger scale operation. So we need to make sure we're thinking about how do we help out small and medium-sized businesses get back on their feet in the recovery. So what I'm committing to doing is, we know already that the governments in the past have given billions of dollars to the largest massive sectors like the banking sector and others, but we're saying, listen, we should be focusing on the small and medium-sized operations. They're the backbone of our economy, and they need the help, and they don't have the same kind of mechanism behind them, the same business operation to get rolling the same way the larger ones can. So that's something that I'm going to really focus on.
Appreciate that. And if you could also mention that maybe in terms of period, it's 3 to 6 months that we're looking at for recovery, and also it depends on what social distancing rules will be in place for that period. That also there.
Right.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. No, I really appreciate it. Again, thank you for sharing your stories. And one of the big things that we first talked about was how important it is to hear these concerns, because there's not really a lot of a space or platform for it. So thank you for sharing.
Well, we're all going through the same thing. So we're just a few people speaking, but there are thousands of us for sure.
For sure.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Alessia. We have Jan from Vancouver who has a question with regards to wage subsidy.
Hi, thank you very much for taking the time. So with small businesses, there's the small and medium-sized business, but we're even another category being the health and wellness. So that really needs to be understood and explained to the government, because with retail and a retail store or auto repair store, they can bring back the same amount of business, but ours is completely different with the gradual entry and what Elisa was talking about with the 6 feet apart. So the amount of income will be completely reduced for quite some time, I would imagine. The wage subsidiary doesn't really work in our industry because most of us, especially with my gym in particular, is a one-on-one personal training studio. They're mostly contract trainers. So we can't help them with money, or we can't get money in to help us. So that kind of needs to be understood, to be explained to the government. Another thing, I know with Australia, they did a really creative thing, and all the banks are helping the landlords in that if your income is reduced by 50%, then you only pay 50% of your rent. If you're completely closed, you get it waived. And the other thing they implemented is no evictions for 6 months. Anyways, I thought that was some good ideas. And I also appreciate how you recognize that it is immediate, because May 1st is around the corner. So all of us only have 9 days to get something in order, or there's going to be a lot of problems. I know there's that $40,000 rent or loan, which is great. You get $10,000 if you pay 30 of it off, but more debt, more, it's just, none of it's that great, to be honest. Yeah. But anyway, no. I think what needs to be explained to them is the health and wellness. Small business is so completely different from a retail store, or it's similar to a restaurant. Like when the restaurants get back, they'll be all spaced apart as well. So their income will also come down. Anyways.
No, thank you so much for sharing, Jen. You're absolutely right that, well, first, one of the big purposes of having this chat is that health and wellness is something that's not really understood. And it's clear in the programs that are being provided, they don't respond to health and wellness specifically. So that's why we wanted to take this chance to hear from you. So thank you for sharing that. And And yeah, it's a really good point that some of the existing programs don't actually really help out very well. Like the wage subsidy might work well for some sectors, but doesn't really apply in the same way to the health and wellness sector. And it's something to point out. And that in the immediacy, the urgency of that rent relief, and the example that you gave of Australia, that's a great example. We've long been saying that there's no way people or small businesses can pay their rent when they're not having any income coming in. And how can we expect businesses to somehow come up with that rent or that lease payment if they don't have any business, and if they've been told that they can't do their job anymore? So really good points, and why, I guess, another really strong example of why we need to get moving on that rent freeze, that just let's stop. Let's pause any payments when it comes to commercial rent or lease until we get out of this crisis. And then your second point is that after the crisis, looking at the revenue and saying, well, if we're not making the same revenue, how can we afford the same lease or rent amount? And looking at the Australian example, if that's something we can bring in place here in Canada, that might really help out a lot.
Yeah, it's a really good video. It's by but no, I forget what she is, but she's heading all of that, and it was a really good YouTube of what they're doing for their residents, citizens.
I hear you. Thanks so much, Dan.
Well, thank you.
Jagmeet, just to follow up with regards to wage subsidy, because so many of our businesses are front-facing and client-facing, we aren't able to, one, take advantage of the wage subsidy because so many of our workers are either contractors or subcontractors. And for those that can take advantage of it, the wage subsidy doesn't really apply, or there's no real use for it because we actually can't hire anyone back because there are no services to provide face-to-face. So is there an opportunity, and what's the likelihood of extending that wage subsidy so that we can have that be applicable to us when our doors actually do open so that we can hire staff back?
Yeah, really great question. So while other businesses might need it right now, yours would need that help in the recovery phase. And once you're able to start having clients come back in the door, that's when you need some help and some support. So these are the type of suggestions we're going to take back and say, hey, listen, for an entire sector of people, the wage subsidy just didn't apply right now, but it could help in the recovery phase if we could get some supports to get people hired back into this sector. Maybe there is an opportunity. But the idea of is there a chance of us expanding the programs? Yeah, of course. The government's only put forward some ideas in some ways to help people, but we keep on finding holes in the programs provided and gaps where people are being missed, and certain businesses, and particularly small and medium-sized businesses, are the ones that seem to be missed. So we absolutely need to keep on finding these gaps and then showing examples. Hey, I spoke with Jennifer and Jan and a whole host of folks that pointed out all these gaps in the programs that the government's provided. Let's do better. Let's make sure there aren't gaps where certain businesses and sectors are falling through.
Mm-hmm. We have a question from Jeremy Cho that is related to employees and the benefits that are available now. So I think Jeremy, do you want to hop in here and ask your question, because we're on this topic now?
Oh yeah, for sure. Hey. For the Canada Emergent Business Account Fund, right? The 40K with the 10K forgivable. Most of us don't actually qualify for that because you need minimum of the 20K payroll. They had it 50, they bloated 20, but still most of us, like Jen said, we have a lot of contractors in the business, and those can be applied to that 20K payroll, even though all of the contractors pay their taxes and everything. Do you know if there's any kind of adjustment or things they're working on in order to support people within our industry, or in this similar situation?
So quick answer, no. Jeremy, right now there isn't, but this is why we're having this call, is to find things that we should be fighting for or pushing for. So it's clear that there's a gap here again, that there's this loan, and it might work for some, but for many in the health and wellness sector, it doesn't apply. So another example of why we need to take these examples and show them to the government and say, hey, Prime Minister Trudeau, you're missing a whole bunch of people here. there's folks that we've spoken with Jeremy from, are you in BC as well?
No, I'm actually in Toronto.
Oh, in Toronto. We spoke with Jeremy in Toronto. Jan was in BC, and we met with them, and they're sharing concerns about the existing programs not being good enough and not really applying to them. So this is why we're having this chat, and I'm going to take these concerns and point out the mistakes.
Cool. I guess another quick question would be, I'm looking at how they're doing in Asia, the areas in which, they've kind of, flattened the curve a little bit. I've noticed that they still haven't really opened up gyms. And then they have to, the gyms, some of them have to actually apply to be open. And also there's a very strict protocols of how many people can actually be within that same space. Do you see, I don't know if you follow like the health and wellness side in Asia or areas where they've actually started letting retail shops open, but do you see that coming into Toronto as well? Or sorry, in Canada, I guess?
Yeah, no, really good question. The recovery phase right now, we're not certain what it's going to look like. Once we get past the immediate crisis and flatten the curve like you were talking about, and we see that we're beating COVID-19, and we start looking at, okay, how do we get people back to work, and how do we move forward to a better, fair kind of society? Where do we go from here? We don't really know what that's going to look like yet. But in that, I think what's coming up from this conversation is we've got to make sure we look at the best practices of what's going on around the world and make sure we're making decisions on evidence, on science, and making sure that if there's a decision that's going to hurt a sector, then we've got to provide some help for that sector. We can't make a decision that says, okay, we're going to limit the space or limit distance or put a distance requirement, but then not also consider what that's going to mean for a business and how that's going to make it harder for them to operate. So I think any decision we make, we have to look at the repercussion on all sectors. And in this case, we got to look at the repercussion to the health and wellness sector.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem, Jeremy.
Thanks, Jeremy. We have Dr. Joelle Kerr, based out of Toronto. You spoke to it earlier. The health and wellness industry is unique and needs a unique response because are responsible for maintaining the well-being for so many Canadians, millions of Canadians, and yet we are the first ones who are dealing with wage subsidy issues, rent issues, and unable to provide these services for Canadians. Despite this, we are still providing online classes, online training, any type of service that we can because we continue to put the well-being of Canadians ahead of everyone else. So, Dr. Joelle Kerr, I'll leave it to you.
Thanks, Jen. Jennifer, thank you so much for this initiative. First off, Jagmeet, thank you for your time. I'm not sure if you can see me. Maybe there's another conversation we need to have about just getting stronger internet connection in Canada, but my screen is slowly coming on here. But I'm still going to pose my question as long as you can hear me. Is that okay?
Yes,
can you hear me?
Yeah, I was giving you a thumbs up. I didn't think you could see me, so yes, definitely.
I can see you. Like I said, internet connection, we can talk about that another time. But you've mentioned this a couple of times. Jennifer has as well. And I'm just going to come out and say that we really don't have a voice for the health and wellness industry in Ottawa, in Ontario, in municipal government at all. The services we provide, as you mentioned, are critical. Mental health, physical health, and emotional health. We do that on a day-to-day basis. We see all our clients more regularly than family doctors do in some respects. So despite the fears of our industry pretty much collapsing, we continue to support communities, like Jen said, via virtual methods. But this isn't ideal. This is not what we came into this industry to do. We like seeing people. We enjoy giving them a high five. It's not the same as a virtual high five. And our services are super important. And they're going to be even more important after this pandemic is over, because there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be suffering from some form of PTSD. What is it that, advice-wise, do you have for us so that we can get our voices heard, we can be recognized, and more importantly, respected? Because right now, I totally am not respected by any level of government that we have right now.
Thanks so much for bringing that up, Doctor. You're absolutely right that, I mean, we've been talking about this throughout this conversation that the health and wellness sector has not been really recognized, or there hasn't been a specific response that acknowledges the challenges that you face. And I think you touched on something really good, that not only will there be people coming out of this crisis in a sense of trauma, having gone through some trauma, having gone through this period of isolation where people feel disconnected from one another. It's going to be hard on people. Their health is going to be impacted, and the wellness is going to be impacted. So in fact, more than ever, we need people who are going to be able to provide a service where people can get healthy again, not just physically, but having that activity gives people a good sense of mental health as well. But I think it's really clear that we're going to need your community, your sector. And if we need a sector, then we need to also commit to making sure that there's specific supports. So yes, a huge yes to what you're saying. There's been an adequate response right now, and I'm hopefully a part of the work to making sure you get a larger platform. But I think the petition was great. Forming the coalition is great. Having a unified voice. One of the things that really works is if there's just a couple of clear requirements or clear demands on the part of the coalition, keeping the demands concentrated and focused really helps get the message out. So, and if there's any way I can help to amplify the message, finding other allies that are willing to take your message and amplify it. But there's certainly ways where we can take the concerns that we're hearing today and make sure they get heard by all levels of government.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate, again, your time, and that's very good, solid advice. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Kerr. So we will just continue to fight the way that we've been fighting, and continue to connect with federal leaders like yourself to elevate our voice and our concerns. We have a question from Dr. Ricky Singh in Toronto with regards to insurance.
Hey guys, how's it going? Hey Jagmeet. Thanks, Jen. I appreciate you spearheading this initiative, and Jagmeet, thank you for taking the time out. I know you're a busy man, so this means a lot to us for you to just hear our stories. So thank you. So my name is Ricky. I'm a chiropractor that works in the downtown core. My business is largely dependent on relationships and partnerships with gym owners like Jen at Fit Squad, as well as other boutique gyms in the downtown area. So obviously they've all been forced to shut down. So we've just been providing telehealth services as much as we can to cover costs, but are still struggling to do so. So my question is regards to insurance companies, in the sense that they're denying coverage for business interruptions during this time of mandated non-essential business closures. So a big part of that is because the language of a global pandemic is not included in the policy to begin with. So how can we ensure small businesses receive the coverage they require to bridge the gap in lost revenue during these civil shutdowns, especially given the prediction of another potential outbreak when the economy starts up again?
Ricky, thanks for the question. It just in a really kind of frustrated way, it seems like we always spend all this money on insurance, and then insurance companies always find a way to not pay us back when we need it. And that's just a frustration I think people feel in general, and it's very fair. It's a real frustration, because the whole purpose we take out insurance is that, hopefully it never happens, but if we go through a moment of crisis, that we can rely on this as support. And then it always seems like the insurance companies kind of weasel the way out of giving us the support that we need when we need it. So most insurance, when it comes to those type of services, are regulated provincially. So this is something we've got to look at a provincial level. But I mean, there's a massive need. A lot of people have lost a lot of income, and that's why people get insurance in those circumstances, to have some buffer. So I hear you on the frustration, and I frankly don't know how we get at this. This is an ongoing problem. Well, I know how we get at it long term. We need to make better laws so insurance companies are forced to provide better service and be there for people when they need them. They kind of have a bit of a carte blanche. They seem to have a real wide authority in denying claims. And that, to me, is something we should change legislatively. And I know how to do that. But in the short term, I'm not sure how we can get help to businesses like yours that are not able to get access to this support that they need because of the insurance that they duly paid for. I mean, it just seems so frustrating.
No, yeah, you're right. No, well, thank you for your time, Jamie. I appreciate it. But if there is anything the government can do to maybe put pressure on insurance companies in any which way, that would be much appreciated.
I hear you on that. And I've got lots of friends that are on the provincial level as well, so I'll make sure they know about that. it's an ongoing struggle with insurance companies. Right now, even auto insurance, no one's driving their car, but they're still charging the same rates. And people said, well, why are you charging us the same rates if no one's driving? You should cut our insurance rates at this point. And they're not doing that either. So there's a lot of concerns around the insurance sector in general and how they kind of exploit people. So thanks for bringing this up. Something that we'll definitely pass on to our provincial counterparts.
Thanks, Ricky. We had a comment with regards to how we can raise awareness for our industry, and someone suggested that you posted on your stories, on your IG story.
Yeah, I was thinking we should do like a follow-up. I'm doing like an Instagram live kind of regularly, which gets lots of viewership. So I'd be happy to have come on and chat about, I bring folks on to chat about things, and people ask questions and people share their concerns, their worries. So I'd love to have folks come on and you can share your concerns in the next Instagram live I do.
We would definitely love that. We're wrapping up our questions here, but if you guys want to continue sending your questions for Jagmeet, or Jagmeet, if you have anything that you want to say in conclusion to the conversations that we've had so far this evening, we'll do that now.
Yeah, first off, Jennifer, thank you for hosting this. You did a great job going through and calling out people to raise their questions. That was awesome. Thanks to everyone being on the call. I was just checking it out. There's a lot of folks on this chat right now. This is amazing to have so many people here. Thank you so much. I want you to know that though you're not being seen and heard, I see you and I hear you, and I want to do whatever I can to make sure that your concerns are being raised and they're being heard. So I'll take what I've heard today and make sure that the government knows about it. I'm going to talk to the Prime Minister about it. I'm going to make sure we raise it in Parliament and do our part to really make sure that no one's left behind. And that's really a big theme I really believe in, is that if we have a crisis that we're going through, we're all going through this together. That means we should look for ways to make sure we take care of everyone. And right now we're seeing a lot of gaps, a lot of programs that are being offered that don't apply to everybody. They don't apply to certain businesses and certain sectors. And today we really focused in on the health and wellness sector as like a vital sector that's not really gotten the attention. So thank you so much for raising your concerns and your stories. I may not always have the answers to the particular problem, but I know that we can find them. And the biggest thing is raising the concerns. So keep on raising them, keep on pointing out the mistakes or the gaps in the current programs so that we can then point out to the government that, hey, listen, we've got to fix this. We've got to find a way to help people out. The biggest thing that I can tell you is that what I'm hearing from a lot of folks and from a lot of folks on the call is how important it is to get a freeze, a stop, a pause, an end to commercial rent and lease payments for this crisis to help people get through. That seems to be a really massive way we can help people out. There's a whole host of other areas. That's one really important thing. And we are with you all the way on that. We are fighting really hard to make sure we get that stop, that pause, that end to lease and rent payments. That's going to help out a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. We have a question here. Someone's wondering what access to mental health support is out there for stressed out folks like us.
At the federal level, we haven't seen a response to that. Some provinces have initiated different mental health services. In Ontario, they've put out some information around mental health. But I mean, that's another really important thing. When we're in this pandemic, there's a lot of worry. People are hearing the news and they're hearing really horrible stories about deaths and people losing their life, people falling ill, people in long-term care homes. All these stories that we're hearing, and now we've got people at home more likely to hear the news. It's going to take a toll. And then the physical distancing, not being able to connect with people, do the things that you love. Like someone mentioned earlier, that people got into the health and wellness sector to connect with people, to physically help out, to be one-on-one with the client, to be able to help them improve their life because of that physical and emotional kind of connection with someone. And not being able to do that has a toll on our mental health. So it's something that we've got to recognize. And what I've been calling for is that what we need to do is include mental health into our healthcare system. It's really something that's been not really considered a part of our healthcare system. It's been considered an aside, but really it should be a vital part of our healthcare. How can we be healthy if we've got mental health struggles, it impacts everything we do. So it's something that I want to see as included as a part of our healthcare system. We should have head-to-toe coverage that includes everything. And so I'm with you on that, and it's a really important point.
Great. So we just want to thank everyone for joining us today. There's been a question as to how community members can continue to support us, and that is just to share with your networks, to sign the petition, keep sharing it. Your support means so much to us, and it's vital to the survival of our industry. Jagmeet, thank you so much for taking your time to listen to our stories, offering your advice, and helping to amplify our voice. And we'll see you on IG Live.
Yes, for sure. I'll have my team let you know about the next time. It should be this week sometime. I'll be doing it. And yeah, I'd love to bring someone on to chat about some of the concerns you have.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for all the questions.
Thank you.
Keep rising spirits in this really difficult time. Keep safe, and we'll get through this.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
Hello. Hi. That was great.